questions.
Dave, you made several referrals after your last audit. I'm thinking primarily of the Youngstown School to ODE. Did anything happen with that? Was there a clawback of state funding as a result of that?
I will get back to you on that. I don't know the answer to it as I stand here.
Would you anticipate that that is what should happen with these referrals? A clawback?
Yeah, I don't know that in this particular case, clawback on funding is capable of being made on the basis of our report. Now, there may be additional work that ODE can do through its FTE analysis that would warrant that. But because this was one day in time, a very narrow slice, I don't think that, well, I know that we would not issue a finding for recovery on this because I don't think it could support it. I don't think it can support the finding number for recovery in the court of law. And that wasn't what this report was designed to produce. Yes. I'm sorry. Okay.
What were your, on the dropout recovery schools, what was the average for attendance, and what is the benchmark that you're after? What's appropriate for those schools? You said they should be given special consideration because of who they serve. What would the goal be?
And there is no benchmark that exists, not in the literature, not in the law, not in the regulations, and we aren't suggesting one. I think my comment was designed to basically say that 50% and under doesn't pass the smell test for me as a taxpayer.
Well, what led you to report these schools? Like, why were these numbers the lowest? Like, what made you report these schools and not other schools?
Well, going to this chart, they exceeded, these three were the only ones that exceeded 2 standard deviations of the entire survey. So that was the benchmark we had set ahead of time to determine who we were going to refer without knowing whether we were going to have anybody. The bell curve might have been tight enough that nobody got out to 2 standard deviations. As it turns out, we had 3, and there are underlying issues beyond simply attendance that are affecting that, go to their business models and whether they're permissible under Ohio law. Yes,
Given how much school data has to be self-reported, is there enough oversight in general of all kinds of data that's coming from schools?
well, that's a couple $1 billion question, isn't it, Andy? You know, I think our report demonstrates that there's not. Our recommendation for dropout recovery programs in particular is suggesting that ODE needs to be much more proactive about sampling these things. Obviously, we can't move past some degree of self-reporting because it's just cost ineffective. It's the same reason we do samples in our audits. You can't go chase every dollar that government spends, and you'll wind up spending way too much money for the value you receive. But here's the thing, audits tend to drive down non-compliance. Why is that? Because if you know somebody's going to be looking, you tend to be paying more attention. When you know mom is going to ask you whether you did your homework before you tune in the ball game, you're going to get the homework done. If mom never asks you about the homework, you're going to try to get away without doing it.
ECOD's been in the news recently about attendance, students logging in to take tests and being courses. Are you looking at doing something like this for e-schools to determine their attendance levels?
E-schools, of course, are implicated a little bit in the blended learning because blended learning is kind of a happening in schools. So the same issues that go to measuring the progress and go to measuring attendance in a blended learning environment are applicable as well in the e-school environment. And I know that the legislature is actively studying these issues and trying to figure out the best way forward. That's beyond the scope of this report, however, and we haven't made any recommendations regarding these schools.
You've said the Department of Education is the worst run agency in the state. pretty strong statement. Is that a function of the fact that they have multiple tasks and some conflict, or is it also a management problem?
You know, I think it's some of all of that. You know, I think it was Tom Dunlop, president of the school board, talked about the multiple levels of accountability. You've got the board, you've got the legislature, you've got the governor, who are all involved in doing the pieces of education oversight. That may play into it. For the purposes of my comments, I'm going based on what I have seen on the ground and what my staff has reported to me over almost 6 years that we've been engaged over there. And I mean, it takes weeks or months to get a meeting. It takes, we have waited on data reports for months on end. Simple kinds of tasks that we would expect to be completed with some degree. I mean, even in government, I would expect data to be available in a couple of weeks when we requested it. So we see over and over again, it's just not, the agency is performing at a very high level. And I think it's because it's a scattershot. They're supposed to do everything about everything. And I think the kind of time has come to sharpen the focus of their mission.
If you were in charge, what roles would you leave with ODE?
Well, certainly the things that are related at the core to education, so curriculum development and teacher licensing are appropriate things for them to be doing. Whether they should, they clearly shouldn't be doing both assessment and the funding piece. They clearly shouldn't be doing advocacy and regulatory oversight.
Who do you think should be taking the reins to fix these issues?
I'm sorry.
Who do you think should take the reins to fix these issues? Is it the legislature, is it the governor?
I think it is the legislature where that authority rests.
I got a little bit of rules committee, but I'll be right back. One of the things that obviously has just happened is we've just selected a new state superintendent. So I think the auditor probably sitting down with we, the members of the General Assembly, especially the chairs of the two education committees, should be sitting down with the state superintendent and figuring out how we're going to address a lot of this. I think that he was selected primarily because, as I think one of the quotes was, he can make the train run on time. So I think taking a report like what the auditors put together, he could come up with recommendations that we could then introduce in the General Assembly for appropriate legislative action. So I will be back shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anybody else?
Just a real functional thing. These visits were done, obviously, you couldn't do them all, go 54 places at once. These are different days. Is there any concern about variation in the data on how it's collected on different days?
There would be if we did it on different days, which is why we did them all in one day.
Okay.
And I want to again commend Marty and Randy for the wonderful job they did. We had a large team. How many people were? Why don't you come up here and explain what was involved logistically, just so that they have that.
So we had roughly 60 auditors out in the field who visited the schools. The traditional schools were by far the hardest animal to plan because for high schools in particular, we needed to make sure we could get those counts done first thing in the morning before students started changing classes and potentially leaving the building. But across the state, we planned it, again, geographically, also trying to be smart about how we laid it out after we selected the community schools to make sure that we could perform the counts without any disruption to the classes that were taking place that day. And also some community schools, as we learned from last year's count, do have a morning session and an afternoon session. So this year, going into the count, being more experienced, we plan to revisit those schools where we were able to identify that they did have an afternoon session to make sure that we were able to count all sessions for that day for any individual school.
Auditor, you had last year 66% high was the highest for the dropout recovery, and now you're below 50. Are you worried that we're heading in the wrong direction with all this?
I think that given the relatively small number, that this is not statistically significant. I don't like seeing that drop. What bothers me more is to see numbers down here in the 20 and 30 percentile. I don't know how, with attendance like that there can be much learning going on. And this is clearly indicative of it needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, thank you all.